Next was the whistling of arrows slicing through the air. They trailed red as they rained down on the watchtower. Henry could hear the dry thunking as they stuck into the wood. No, Henry gasped at the realization that the kingdom had introduced weapons that could kill people into this argument. Luckily, there wasn't anyone in the watchtower at the moment. Was that why they attacked it? Or would they have done it even if there were people inside? Lady Henry. They don't seem to be aiming over here, but it's probably better for you to stay out of range. Come this way, hurry. Henry had been standing stock still taking in the scene, but Jujumu pulled her arm. With no will to resist, she followed him, but she didn't turn away from the watchtower. As the self-defense squad members withdrew, the watchtower burst into flames. The roof was made mostly of straw, so it burned up immediately. As she watched, the ceiling collapsed into giant flames. The destruction could be seen from anywhere in the village. Heart-rending cries went up here and there, but one was louder than all the rest. Henry breathed in short, rapid breaths due to the shock. She looked at the one who had emitted the most sorrowful scream. It was a man who had moved to the village. His face showed both hatred and despair. Looking at those around him who shared his expression, she realized they were all transplants. Henry remembered that their villages had been burned down. "They were the enemy," the man yelled. "They are our enemy. If they were they wouldn't do something like that. I am going to fight. The kingdom, those good-for-nothings never helped us. Are you going to burn this village down too?" shouted a plump woman. "Are we going to let them get away with this? If they were going to kill us, let them. We'll take as many of them with us as we can. This will be our revenge," a young man spat. With the loosing of the flaming arrows, a nearly insane hatred took over the crowd. "Lady Henry, you should call for a vote." Jujumu made the level-headed suggestion with the steely face of a warrior. Those people aren't in their right minds. We should vote once everyone calms down a bit. There's no time. And there's nothing that says our opponents want go on a rampage. The village should decide what to do. He was right. They had already shot flaming arrows at the watchtower. Their next attack would surely be worse. They didn't have a second to lose. Having made up her mind, Henry took a deep breath. When she glanced at Enfira, who had brought Nemu over, he gave her a little nod as if to say, "You can do this." Henry felt a slight warmth in her chest. That gave her the last bit of courage she needed. "Everyone, we are going to make the decision for the village with everyone here. Once we reach a decision, please follow it." Energetic voices replied in approval. "Does anyone think the village should go along with the kingdom's suggestion?" No one raised their hand. As her heart pounded, Henry shouted, "Then we'll risk our lives to oppose it. Raise your hand if you want to fight against the kingdom." With a roar, so many hands flew into the air that there were too many to count. And none of them had simply raised their hands. All were tightly balled fists. The villagers' faces were determined. Certainly there was fear. Of course there was. They had chosen the path that ensured their deaths, but something else affected them more deeply. They didn't want to be the type of people who repaid all the kindness they had received with ingratitude. "Then we fight. This is our fight. We'll repay that kindness. Jujumu, please come up with our battle plan." Jujumu moved quickly to the front and stood next to Henry. "We've seen your determination. Why all are gonna die here, is that all right?" The only response to the seasoned veteran's words was yes. "You lot have a lot of bark for how pale your faces are. You're all magnificent. Now I don't mean to dampen the enthusiasm, but don't you think we should have the young ones escape? Shouldn't the only ones to die be us and the older men?" One of the older villagers spoke. "That's a good point, but it's futile, isn't it? The enemy is waiting outside both gates. Even if the children climbed over the wall, they'd definitely be discovered. Yeah, if they ran the normal way, things would go right as you said." Jujumu grinned. "They wouldn't be able to run and stay hidden. That's why first we'll open the front gate and draw in the enemy. Once they've lowered their guard, that's when we strike. If we can do enough damage, they should concentrate their forces." He looked around at everyone. Of course, they might also realize it's a distraction. Even so, if our attack is strong enough, they'll have no choice but to gather together. Any questions or concerns? Doesn't seem like it, but Jujumu, where should they run to? That's obvious, lady. Into the Tove woodlands. We'll have Arg and Lady Brita, with their knowledge of the forest, go along with the evacuees. I am sure they'll be able to manage until these guys leave. The villagers were prepared to give their lives, but it was only natural that they didn't want their children to be killed. When Jujumu realized their fighting spirit had slackened with the relief of a lower possibility of losing the young ones, he said with a grim expression, "Listen, We need to land the first strike. Then we should focus on attacking and defending after they concentrate their forces. We can let them get a breather in between. The more powerful our attacks are, the more likely those who run will survive. Several people were laughing. It wasn't due to despair or a lapse in sanity. It was refreshing laughter. If my wife and children are saved, then I have no regrets. I am happy to pay back our debt to Aints Ul Gown. You said it, I want to be a pathetic dad. So how will we split up? In response to Enfira's question, Jujumu scanned the faces of all the villagers present. I'd like you and Lady Henry to protect the wives and children as they withdraw from the village. And then, as I said before, with woodland life in mind, Lady Brita and Arg and his tribe will be there. What? Henry yelped audibly in surprise. It was her duty as head of the village to operate with everyone until the end. Having decided to send the villagers into a deadly battle, it was her duty to go with them. She tried to say those things, but the villagers spoke faster. They all agreed with Jujumu. As she thought about how to convince them otherwise, they decided on a plan without her. Henry, we're counting on you. Please look after my kids. My wife was killed, but I still have my kids. The villagers' firm handshakes contained all sorts of emotions. Henry was moved nearly to tears by the time Enfira stepped beside her. Henry, let us go. Our battle will take place after we survive. It's a battle we can lose, and maybe Aints Ul Gown will come to save us again. Since we've been to his castle before, it would be best for us to be around if he does. That's right. Oh, Jujumu, that horn you used to summon us there was well, even if you used it, it would only be a drop in the bucket. Instead, put the new goblins to work after this battle. Almost crying, Henry pressed her hands against her eyes. Understood. We'll take good care of your wives and children, everyone. Let us go, NFI. The gate slowly swung open. Aha, we should have shot the flaming arrows first. Readying the follow-up volley was a waste, but Barbaro frowned in displeasure. They had used up too much precious time they didn't have. It would be quite a forced march to make it up later, but there was nothing to be done about that now. This was the mistake of the Marquis's men. If he hadn't given the order to loose the flaming arrows, he couldn't even imagine how much more time they would have wasted. He looked to the heavens, cursing his poor luck to have to manage such foolish subordinates. They would also need some time for executing some villagers. He would hang them from the walls as examples of how foolish it was to disobey the royal family. Then they would need time to find someone who knew Aints Ul Gown well. That seemed like it would take longer than the executions, because it would have to begin with an interrogation. Shit, how was I supposed to know I would need a torturer? I guess I could tell them I promised to spare them. The problem is the children. There was no point in letting the young live. In the first place, a child could never survive on its own. Hanging it with its parents would be the compassionate thing to do. Do we even have that much rope? It would be nice if the numbers worked out. The soldiers approached the gate. He was incredibly satisfied with the sight of the royal family's flag advancing at the head of the line. He wanted the flag bearer in his honor guard once he was king. The soldier holding the banner passed through the gate first and went flying backward as if repelled by something. The royal family's flag fluttered through the air before landing on the ground. From within the gate, a huge figure showed itself. That's an ogre, right? An ogre, Barbaro cried stupidly, forgetting the royal family's dignity in the confusion of a situation he never anticipated. Yes, it was an ogre, a people-eating subhuman. Multiple soldiers, just as bewildered as Barbaro at the sudden appearance of the monster, were batted away with its gigantic club. When they fell to the ground, after flying quite a distance in a scattering of flesh scraps, it felt like a sign. The other soldiers scrambled to be the first to escape the area in front of the gate. More ogres exited and ran after them. The soldiers who had taken off in the humiliating rout were clobbered away with clubs. They were like dolls being sent flying by children. Their retreat was too sloppy to be called a withdrawal, probably because they were the Baron's troops. They never thought their reward of being the first to enter the village after firing the flaming arrows would end up like this. Just as Barbaro raised his eyebrows at the sight of the Baron, abandoning his territory's soldiers and skedaddling out of harm's way himself, a high-pitched whistle sounded. The Marquis's cavalry had all raised their lances. Their magnificent discipline was enough to make Barbaro think, now that's more like it. But they couldn't jump into the melee of the ogres chasing the fleeing soldiers. A lance was most destructive during the charge. Its advantages were neutralized in a melee. Why aren't you firing? Barbaro screamed. Damages would mount if they continued to let their opponents close in. The best move was to forsake the soldiers fleeing toward them and shoot them along with the villagers. As Barbaro was getting irritated, the ogres began to retreat. The cavalry couldn't follow them to attack. It seemed the retreating soldiers were in the way, so they allowed the ogres to re-enter the gate. Barbaro clenched the reins of his horse as he watched the men take in the soldiers who had returned. They were working to build an actual battle formation. He wanted to finish this stupid mission as quickly as possible. He wanted to go make a name for himself on the battlefield against the Empire. From that dream resulted this mess. He was sure that if he went helplessly back to Rantel, despite the unforeseen ogres, his reputation would suffer further. Then the gap in the race for the throne between him and his younger brother, Zanak, who should have been an extra, would be decisive. Or is this all going according to plan? The loud tongue click he couldn't hold back practically echoed. He knew the nobles nearby were watching him, but he didn't have time to try to gloss it over. Barbaro's sharp gaze was directed at the knight. He commanded the Marquis's elite forces and was running toward them. What is that? Has the village been taken over by ogres? Do you know anything about this? Not a thing, Your Highness. If monsters were here, the tax collector would have reported it. He was just here, and if he hadn't returned, that would have been an issue too. What in the world is going on in this village? Barbaro sensed the knight was genuinely at a loss. Even if this was a trap to reduce his power, she realized this man had not been informed about it. So in one way he was an ally, so we don't have enough information. Well, that can be helped. There were 5 ogres. If there were any more, surely they would have attacked. So there can be double that amount. 5 ogres. You can take them out, right? Of course, Your Highness. Each of us boasts strength equal to the elites in the Royal Select, who are said to be the strongest in the kingdom. 5 ogres are no match for us. I don't doubt you, but I do wonder something. As far as I know, ogres are not very intelligent monsters. Their actions earlier seemed too clever. They lured us in by opening the gate, and then attacked with perfect timing. There has to be a commander. If one of the villagers is controlling them, with all due respect, that's not possible. How would a mere farmer tame ogres? But there is the prospect of someone else. If possible, I'd like to gather intelligence about who we're up against. Barbaro couldn't contain his aggravation. How can you just chit-chat like that? Look, he pointed to the royal family's flag lying on the ground in front of the gate. It looked like a tattered rag. Look what they've done to the royal family's flag. I don't care what it takes, we must destroy this village. Gather the soldiers. Loose your flaming arrows and burn it to the ground. This is a chance to get some siege experience. We're past the point of getting through this without any casualties. Attack like you mean to raise the place. Wait, perhaps it's not a villager but a subhuman with a brain, like an ogre sorcerer. Maybe, but what about it? Barbaro spoke slowly to the puzzled knight, as if he was explaining to a child. Listen. It doesn't matter if it's the villagers controlling the ogres or a smarter monster controlling the villagers and the ogres. The people in this village have rebelled against the royal family, the rulers of this land. We need to show the world how foolish that was. It's possible the villagers have been taken hostage and are innocent. Were you not listening? It doesn't matter. The knight seemed to be having difficulties accepting her point, so Barbaro shrugged. Okay, I understand how you feel. Then here is the best compromise. Capture unresisting villagers. We can judge them later. Will that work for you? Yes, Your Highness, the knight bowed. Barbaro nodded in satisfaction at the spirited reply. But I have one condition: overwhelmingly crush them. If I lose men here, I'll never hear the end of it. That goes for you as well. People will say you warriors are supposed to be the Marquis's trump card, but you couldn't even run an errand to a village in a satisfactory way. But the ogres, an excuse like that isn't going to fly. That's just how the world is. Yes, Your Highness. If you understand, then get it done. Gather up the soldiers around the rear gate too, and go cut down a tree from the forest. Make a simple battering ram. I'll leave the details of the operation up to you. Win the fight while keeping losses to a minimum. Kill anyone who runs. Pots of oil were thrown against the wall, and more flaming arrows were loosed. There was a violent explosion, as if someone had cast fireball. As the black smoke rose, bright red flames raged. The self-defense squad members were shaken, so Jujumu gripped his magic sword tightly and roared. Don't get scared. This fire isn't enough to bring down these walls. It's more important to guard the gate. A huge bang rang out, and the gate creaked. The frame of the watchtower was still standing. The thick logs of the walls wouldn't burn up even with the volleys of flaming arrows. Apparently, his idea that the fire had been only a distraction while they broke through the gate was right. It shook with another bang. This echo was heavier than the punches an ogre could deliver. It had to be a siege weapon, probably a battering ram. Loose your arrows. Following Jujimu's shout, the villagers shot their arrows with practiced hands. Screams of pain went up from the other side of the wall, but the battering ram attacks didn't stop. Maybe it was a wave attack of multiple battering rams. Loose, timed with Jujimu's voice, another volley of arrows flew, but this time, the other side shot back. Several times, the number of their arrows returned as a rain. But not one of them hit anybody. Their opponents weren't inferring the firing locations. Their arrows were sticking out of places that totally missed the mark. Still, if that many archers continued firing, their hit ratio would gradually improve. That meant there would be trouble if they didn't immediately reduce their ratio to 0 again. Take shelter, we were switching positions. Following the order, which was the product of Jujimu skillfully raising and lowering his voice at the same time, the villagers began to shift in a panic. The villagers had only been taught how to drop arrows on the other side of the wall by aiming from a specific location. For that reason, their hit ratio from that position was high, but switching positions meant they would have trouble aiming where they wanted. A shooting battle wouldn't work anymore. Take up your spears, we'll do the rest at close quarters. The thwack of metal striking something behind the wall was different than the sound of the battering ram they'd been hearing up until now. They must have brought out axes. The sounds could be heard from more than one location. Numbers truly were violence. There was a good chance the attacks on the walls and gate were distractions. Soldiers were climbing up ladders somewhere else entirely. That was the tactic Jujimu would have chosen if he was commanding. As I thought, their tactic of splitting their forces is working quite well. Khan was overwhelmingly outnumbered. They couldn't possibly cope with all the different attacks. By making them think that, they spread their forces out even further. After they had thinned out enough enemies, the village would strike. In wedge formation, they would charge on the army's main position. If they did that, the soldiers would probably panic and concentrate their forces. That's why he had the ogres come back in. Even if they had charged at that point, they probably couldn't have caused enough chaos to get the soldiers back from going around to the rear gate. If the detached enemies come back, that'll mean we'll be surrounded with nowhere to run. I guess it'll be what you call jumping into the dragon's mouth. These tactics were sure to leave them dead. That said, well, our plan is already half successful, Jujimu murmured in a relaxed tone as he turned his gaze toward the rear gate, though he couldn't see it. He prepared the escape route with the highest possible chances of survival for his master, so he had no regrets. To make a cold assessment, if all the villagers fighting here died, the enemy wouldn't know how many got away, nor what became of Enri. Protecting Enri was Jujimu's highest priority. For that, he was willing to sacrifice everything, which was why everyone. When the gate breaks, we're going to charge. Our objective is their main position. Taking out their boss is the only way we'll survive. Arg. A determined roar went up. Some voices trembled, but he didn't sense anyone chickening out. They were men with the will to protect their children and loved ones as much as they could. Enri and Enfira dashed down from the rear watchtower and ran to where the women and children were gathered by the gate. Enfira's grandmother, Lizzie, wasn't among them. She was busy hiding the many alchemical items Aunt's Ool gown had given her. She probably wouldn't have time to escape, but she undertook the task with that understanding. It's okay, we didn't see anyone in the area. Let us open the gate and head for the forest. The group of children were so frightened their faces were pale, but they nodded seriously. As Enfira and Brita turned the crank, one side of the gate began to open. First, Enri poked her head out the slim opening to survey the area. There was no mistake. They had seen from the watchtower that there were no soldiers. Jujimu's strategy must have worked. Okay, go. Arg and the goblins from his tribe were the first to leave. Their role was to cut an escape route if soldiers were waiting in the woods. Next went Brita. She was on the lookout for any soldiers Arg and the others might miss. Out of consideration for the children's feet, the vanguard adjusted their speed as they ran toward the trees. After that, the children took off running with a buddy. Some mothers ran with their children in their arms. Children without mothers grabbed the hand of any older child. Bringing up the rear, Enri and Enfira glanced at each other and then ran. After exiting the gate, the forest was a long way away. It seemed farther away than usual. They frantically pumped their legs, still so far, still. Just then, they heard a horse neigh behind them. Henry's cardiopulmonary function during this period was shockingly good. It almost grossed her out.